Let's jump right into this explainer. Have you ever wondered why it is literally so hard to just put your phone down? Well, today we are going to explore the absolutely fascinating neurobiology behind that exact feeling. Think about it. We are literally living through an unprecedented experiment in human neurobiology right now. Never before have billions of us walked around with these sophisticated, dopamine-dispensing supercomputers just sitting in our pockets. And these devices, they are engineered by some of the absolute brightest minds in tech, and they have one primary goal: to capture and hold your attention. So today, we're going straight to the science of why this happens. We'll be pulling from clinical research, behavioral psychology, and even the actual design frameworks that these tech platforms use to keep us hooked.
So here is our roadmap for this explainer. First, the digital Pavlov experiment. Second, we're unpacking the dopamine loop. Third, the slot machine effect. Fourth, how we get hijacked by infinite scroll. And finally, number 5, deconditioning your digital dependency. Let's get to it.
All right, starting off with part 1, the digital Pavlov experiment, or conditioning in the digital age.
I really want you to think about this for a second. Have you ever opened your phone, just to quickly check a single text message, and then suddenly you sort of wake up 45 minutes later, completely clueless as to where the time went? Yeah, we have all been there. Researchers actually call this digital immersion. Now, if this happens to you a lot, I need you to know something right out of the gate. This is not a personal failure of your willpower. Not at all. It is actually a symptom of highly targeted behavioral engineering. You aren't lacking discipline. You're just interacting with a system that was quite literally built to bypass your conscious decision-making. You probably remember hearing about Pavlov, right? How he conditioned his dogs to expect food just by ringing a bell? Well, our devices are doing the exact same thing to us. They condition us using these incredibly seamless feedback loops, which creates deep-rooted behavioral patterns. Think about all those digital stimuli, the pop-up notifications, the little red alerts, the buzzing in your pocket. Through repeated exposure to those cues, we've been conditioned to respond in highly predictable ways. That compulsive urge to check your screen, or that weird anxiety you feel when you leave your phone in another room, those are biologically reinforced patterns. Basically, we have all become completely willing participants in a giant, modern-day Pavlovian experiment.
Moving on to section 2, unpacking the dopamine loop and the brain's seeking system.
Okay, we need to completely shatter a massive myth right now about your brain chemistry. So many people think dopamine is the pleasure chemical. Actually, scratch that. It's totally wrong. Dopamine is not about pleasure or satisfaction. It is your brain's seeking system. It evolved way back when to reward survival behaviors, right? Things like finding food, connecting with your tribe, gathering new information. And the key here is that dopamine thrives on anticipation. So when your phone buzzes, your brain isn't actually experiencing pleasure in that moment. What it's feeling is a massive, highly motivating surge of anticipation. It's the thrill of the hunt.
Let's look at exactly how this builds a continuous feedback loop, basically turning every little red notification badge into a full-blown cycle of action. Step 1 is the stimulus. That's your visual cue or notification. Step 2 is anticipation. This is the crucial part. This is when the dopamine release actually begins, way before you even unlock your screen to see what the message says. Step 3 is the action, where you physically engage with the device. And step 4 is the reward, which is usually some sort of unpredictable payoff. But here is the kicker. As you repeat this cycle over and over, your brain physically adapts. It gets kind of numb, becoming less sensitive to dopamine, which means you need more frequent hits just to feel normal engagement. It's exactly why sitting down to do slow, focused, deep work suddenly feels incredibly boring by comparison.
Which brings us to section 3, the slot machine effect, and how variable reward schedules work.
So to really understand this addiction, we have to look at how app designers exploit that dopamine loop. And they do it using something called a variable reward schedule. This basically proves that you don't even need a guaranteed reward to drive crazy levels of engagement. Think about it. If literally every single post on your feed was the funniest thing you'd ever seen, you'd actually get bored pretty fast. The human brain's dopamine system goes into overdrive when rewards are totally unpredictable. It is literally the exact same psychology as a casino slot machine. Every time you pull that lever, it might be a jackpot. With your phone, every single swipe on your feed holds the promise of a viral video or hilarious meme. It's a digital lever, and that uncertainty, that is what causes the massive dopamine spike. You're hooked because you're constantly chasing that next digital jackpot. Now, it's super important to realize that not all notifications are created equal. As you can see here, some of these are literally hijacking the neural circuitry involved in learning and addiction. Take social media likes or gaming rewards, for example. Those light up the nucleus accumbens and the VTA. Those are really deep reward centers in your brain. Because they use that variable reward schedule we just talked about, their addiction potential is incredibly high, almost gambling-like. But then, look at work emails. Those actually trigger the amygdala, which is your brain's fear center, fueling a moderate, anxiety-driven response. Compare all of that to a standard calendar alert. That just pings your prefrontal cortex. It has functional utility and very low addiction potential. The takeaway here? Tech designers know exactly which specific buttons to push to light up the most vulnerable parts of your brain.
Let's jump into Section 4, hijacked by infinite scroll and the removal of stopping cues.
I love this example. So researchers once did this amazing study where participants were unknowingly eating out of self-refilling soup bowls. Because they never saw the visual cue of an empty bowl, they ended up eating 73% more soup. No way, right? Well, the infinite scroll does the exact same thing to our media consumption. By smoothing out the experience and completely removing the physical friction of having to click a next page button, these platforms eliminate our natural finish lines. When you take away the physical bottom of a web page, you get completely disoriented. You lose all track of time simply because the app's architecture intentionally ripped out the stopping cues. Those cues are what normally prompt your brain to pause and ask, wait, do I actually want to keep looking at this?
And this frictionless design, it doesn't just waste your time. It creates automatic behaviors that can really mess with your cognitive function and mental health. It's what we call the algorithmic trap. When a task requires almost zero effort, like flicking your thumb, and your dopamine-driven motivation is high, the behavior just becomes completely automatic doom scrolling. And the scary part is that these algorithms are designed to prioritize watch time over your well-being, always. This makes users, especially teenagers, incredibly vulnerable to falling down these crazy rabbit holes of extreme or distressing content. It's actually become such a massive, undeniable issue that the European Union's Digital Services Act now officially mandates that large platforms have to assess these algorithmic recommendations as systemic risks to fundamental rights and public health. It's a really big deal.
All right, let's wrap things up with Section 5, deconditioning your digital dependency and taking back control.
So let's do a quick reality check. We need to look at some clinical warning signs to see if your phone has morphed from a helpful tool into an automatic compulsion. For instance, have you ever experienced phantom vibrations? You know, when your brain is so hypervigilant for a notification that you actually hallucinate your phone buzzing in your pocket when it didn't? Or how about compulsively checking the literal second you wake up, or anytime you're even slightly bored? Maybe you feel a really weird, heavy anxiety when you don't have internet access. Or perhaps you're stuck in the productivity paradox. You're constantly connected to work and information, but your focus is completely scattered. If any of this sounds like you, or if your phone is interrupting your real-world relationships, it means your dopamine pathways have become sensitized. It's the exact same pattern we see in other behavioral addictions.
Look, because our brains have been so thoroughly hijacked, just trying to use willpower alone is not going to cut it. You have to actively dismantle the environmental triggers to get your autonomy back. Step 1. Disable all non-essential notifications. Just turn them off. This kills the external hot triggers that prompt you to check your phone, effectively cutting off that dopamine anticipation loop before it even starts. Step 2. Establish physical boundaries. Keep your phone out of the bedroom or leave it in another room while you're trying to work. This adds physical friction, which actually forces your rational brain, your prefrontal cortex, to wake up and engage before you blindly grab your device. And step 3, replace the behavior. You have to find alternative, intentional sources of dopamine so you don't just automatically default right back to a screen the second you feel a little bit bored or uncomfortable.
I really want to leave you with this final thought. Think about how flawlessly these platforms have woven themselves into the fabric of your daily life, literally exploiting your own biology just to keep you scrolling. But the knowledge you've picked up in this explainer today, that is your first line of defense. Remember, every single app on your phone is fighting a war for a strictly finite resource, your attention. It's time to decide who actually gets to control it. So ask yourself, honestly, are you the master of your device, or are you just pulling the lever on a digital slot machine? I highly recommend taking action on those deconditioning steps right now and taking back your cognitive autonomy. Thanks for joining me.